I, 28F, had spent years working my way up in my field. It wasn't easy, but I had built a solid reputation, someone dependable, hardworking, and damn good at what I did. So when a senior position opened up at my company, everyone, including my boss, told me it was mine. It wasn't even a question. I had the experience, the results, and the backing of the right people. Then Vanessa took an interest. My older sister, Vanessa 32F, had always been the golden child. She had the charm, the confidence, and the ability to spin any situation in her favor. But she struggled to maintain a steady career, often moving between jobs. However, through networking and leveraging personal connections, she had managed to secure positions that looked impressive on paper. It seemed like this was just another opportunity where she could talk her way in. Even if she wasn't truly qualified, I never held it against her. Family is family, and I figured she'd figure things out eventually. A few weeks before my final interview, Vanessa suddenly started asking a lot of questions about my job, what the role required, how the interview process worked, what kind of leadership my boss preferred. At first, I thought she was just making conversation. Then she casually mentioned applying for the same role. She laughed it off like it was some kind of joke, but something about the way she said it made my stomach drop. I should have taken it seriously. The day before my interview, I got called into my boss's office. He looked uncomfortable, like he didn't want to be having the conversation. Apparently, someone had sent an anonymous email to the company with serious concerns about my work. False accusations of unethical behavior, mishandling projects, and mistreating colleagues. Complete nonsense. I was blindsided. Instead of preparing for my interview, I spent the next 24 hours scrambling to defend myself. I had to pull records, emails, and reports to disprove the claims. My boss reassured me he didn't believe the accusations, but HR had to investigate, and it delayed everything. Vanessa, seeing the opening, submitted her application. She had the advantage of timing. By the time HR cleared me, they had already advanced her in the hiring process. I later found out that one of the decision makers was an old acquaintance of hers, which gave her just enough leverage to seal the deal. I didn't put the pieces together right away. I was too focused on clearing my name, trying to figure out who would even do this to me. Then a friend from another department let something slip. Vanessa had known about the accusations before they became public. She had been talking about how unfortunate it was that my reputation had suddenly taken a hit. That's when it clicked. I dug deeper. A trusted coworker from HR who had always been supportive of me discreetly shared details about the anonymous email. As soon as I saw the wording, the phrasing, it was unmistakably Vanessa's. She had used things only she would know, twisting them just enough to sound believable. When I confronted her, she played dumb, swore up and down she had nothing to do with it. But when I presented what I had a close friend in it, had confirmed the email came from an IP address linked to Vanessa, her face fell. She admitted it, said she was desperate, and that she had no choice. I debated taking this to HR, but my past experience told me they wouldn't want more internal conflict between siblings, especially since they had already hired her. Apparently, she needed this job more than I did. And our parents? They took her side. It was just a misunderstanding. She made a mistake. You can't hold on to grudges forever. I was furious. I wanted to scream, to burn everything down, but instead, I took a breath. I looked at Vanessa, at my parents, at everyone making excuses for her, and then I smiled. I told them I forgave her. I went to family events, acted like nothing had happened, played the role of the bigger person. Meanwhile, I started watching, listening, gathering everything I could about Vanessa's new job. Because if she thought she had won, she had no idea what was coming next. I wasn't just going to get even. I was going to make sure she felt every single thing she had done to me. Slowly, quietly, in a way that she'd never see coming. And by the time she realized, it would already be too late. Fixing my reputation wasn't easy. Even though the allegations had been proven false, the damage had already been done. In an industry where trust was everything, people didn't forget scandals overnight. Some of my professional relationships had become strained, and I knew I had to work twice as hard to rebuild what Vanessa had taken from me. So I did. I doubled down, took on every project I could, and made sure every bit of my work was flawless. I leaned on the people who knew my real work ethic, old colleagues, mentors, anyone who could vouch for me. Slowly, I regained credibility. Then something unexpected happened. A competitor of my old company reached out with an offer. It wasn't just any offer, it was for a position even better than the one Vanessa had stolen. More money, more responsibility, and most importantly, more influence in the industry. I accepted without hesitation. Meanwhile, Vanessa had no idea. She was riding high on her so-called success, bragging to friends and family about how she had finally made it. She had always been good at making herself look more accomplished than she really was. People ate it up. Our parents beamed with pride, repeating her exaggerated success stories at every family gathering. But she didn't just stop there. She made sure I knew. She slipped in little comments, casual jabs about how things work out for the best and how some people just aren't cut out for leadership. It was the same tone she always used, pretending to be supportive while making it clear she had won. She had no idea what was coming. With my new job, I had access to people Vanessa didn't. Higher-ups, decision makers, the kind of people who could make or break careers. And unlike Vanessa, I actually took the time to build real professional relationships. I never had to force my way into circles. I earned my place there. And that's when I started planting the seeds. I never openly trashed Vanessa. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I made small, carefully placed comments, conversations about workplace ethics, about how companies needed leaders who could be trusted. I let the right people connect the dots themselves. Vanessa had always relied on charisma over competence, but in her previous jobs, she was never in a role long enough for people to notice her shortcomings. This time, though, she had taken on a position where results couldn't be faked. Without a quick escape or another job offer waiting, she was forced to deliver, and that's when the cracks started showing. It started with whispers, small doubts, questions about whether she was really qualified for the role she had taken. Clients began asking for second opinions on her work. Then, Vanessa made her first big mistake. Desperate to prove herself, she took on a high-profile client that was way out of her league. It was the kind of project that could either make or break a career. She dove in, overpromised, and completely overestimated her abilities. What she didn't know was that I had connections in that client's company. I made sure they scrutinized everything. Every deadline, every detail. No more smooth-talking her way out of mistakes. They picked apart her work, questioned every decision. Within weeks, it became clear Vanessa was in over her head. The project was a disaster. The client lost money, deadlines were missed, and people started talking. At first, she tried to cover it up. She blamed her team, threw around excuses, and even tried playing the victim, claiming she had been given too much responsibility too soon. But the damage was done. Her bosses started paying attention. The same people who had once been impressed by her charm were now questioning if they had made a mistake. And just like that, the cracks in her perfect life had begun to show. The project Vanessa had botched wasn't just a failure, it was an embarrassment. High-profile clients don't like losing money, and in our industry, word travels fast. People started whispering about her incompetence. The first signs of trouble showed up in small ways. A few key colleagues stopped looping her into important conversations. A senior executive who had once praised her as a rising star was noticeably distant at a company event. She had no idea yet, but she was no longer a trusted name in the room. Then HR called her in for a performance review earlier than usual. Her manager had already raised concerns, and HR had begun quietly monitoring her work. By the time she was formally reviewed, the decision was nearly made. Vanessa had always been able to talk her way out of any mistake, brush things off, and keep moving forward. But now, there were actual concerns about her work. The failed project had exposed just how little she actually knew. Her confidence started slipping. Instead of handling things quietly, she complained to our parents. She painted it as office politics, claiming her coworkers were jealous or that she had been set up to fail. They, of course, believed every word. I sat through dinner after dinner listening to them reassure her, telling her she was just going through a rough patch. I nodded along, acted supportive, and played my part. Meanwhile, Vanessa was desperate to fix her reputation. She needed a win, something big to prove she still deserved her position. That's when she made her second major mistake. She lied. She submitted a report with manipulated revenue projections, claiming she had successfully revived a struggling account. At first glance, the numbers looked impressive, but discrepancies appeared. Her estimates didn't match the actual sales data, and finance flagged inconsistencies. And in a field where accuracy is everything, someone was bound to notice. I made sure of it. A mutual connection in her company, a former colleague of mine, got an anonymous tip suggesting a closer look at Vanessa's latest report. It didn't take long for the truth to come out. The numbers were fabricated, and now she had no way to spin it. HR didn't just issue another warning. They put her on notice. One more mistake and she was gone. Her paranoia kicked in. She became convinced that someone in the company was trying to sabotage her. She started acting out, throwing blame in every direction. She pointed fingers at coworkers, accused people of withholding information from her, and even implied that someone was jealous of her success. But no one was buying it. People started distancing themselves. The same colleagues who used to admire her were now avoiding her. She was no longer someone to impress, she was someone to stay away from. While Vanessa was struggling, my own career was reaching new heights. Another opportunity came my way, one I knew she had once dreamed of, a bigger role at a company that held serious weight in the industry. It was the kind of job she had always wanted, but could never actually land. I accepted without hesitation. Vanessa didn't know yet, but she would soon. Her downfall was accelerating, and she had no idea I was behind any of it. One night, after yet another disastrous day at work, she called me. Her voice was shaky. She talked about how unfair everything was, how nothing seemed to be going right. She was exhausted, overwhelmed, and desperate for someone to reassure her that it would all be okay. I gave her the same empty words of support she had once given me. Sometimes things don't work out for a reason. And just like that, the first cracks had turned into fractures. She had no idea, but the worst was still coming. Vanessa had always been the type to walk into a room and own it. She knew how to command attention, spin any situation in her favor, and charm her way out of trouble. But this time, words weren't enough. The cracks in her career had turned into deep fractures, and I was making sure they spread. After the falsified numbers were exposed, everything Vanessa did at work was under a microscope. Every report she submitted was double-checked. Every meeting she attended had another manager sitting in. The trust she had relied on was gone, and she wasn't handling it well. Then came the biggest humiliation yet. Her boss assigned her a mentor. Officially, it was framed as support, someone to help guide her through challenges. But everyone knew the truth. She wasn't trusted to work independently anymore. A more experienced employee now oversaw her work, reviewing every decision before she made it. Vanessa, who once bragged about leading teams, was now being treated like a new hire who couldn't be left alone. Her coworkers started keeping their distance. The same people who used to laugh at her jokes and admire her confidence were now whispering behind her back. The industry gossip about her incompetence had stuck, and now, no one wanted to be associated with her downfall. The pressure built fast, and Vanessa cracked. In a meeting with several employees, she lashed out at a junior staff member who made a minor mistake. The tension in the room shifted immediately. No one had ever seen her snap like that before. The junior employee went straight to HR, filing a complaint. I made sure it wasn't forgotten. Through my contacts, I ensured her outburst reached the right ears. Whispers of her hostile behavior started circulating. People suddenly remembered the time she had dismissed others' ideas, taken credit for work she hadn't done, and treated colleagues with arrogance. Her boss called her in again. And this time, it wasn't just a performance review. It was a warning. Vanessa, who had always been in control, now had none. She called me that night. The paranoia in her voice was unmistakable. She was convinced people were turning against her. She said nothing felt the same, that people were treating her differently. She wasn't wrong. I played dumb, acted sympathetic, told her to keep pushing forward. She didn't know I was the one making sure the walls closed in on her. Her confidence was gone. She started second-guessing herself in meetings, hesitating before making decisions, and delaying projects because she was too scared of making another mistake. Then came the ultimate embarrassment. A major client, one of the biggest accounts her company had, requested someone else to handle their project. They didn't trust her anymore. It was a public blow to her reputation, one she couldn't spin. Her boss didn't sugarcoat it this time. She had two choices: fix her reputation or lose her job. She tried to salvage things by reaching out to her industry connections, hoping someone would vouch for her. I made sure none of them responded positively. She had burned too many bridges, and now, when she needed people the most, no one was willing to stick their neck out for her. The stress was eating her alive. She started drinking more. She had never been a heavy drinker before, but now she was showing up to happy hours more often, staying out late, and making bitter, cryptic posts online about how people only care when you're winning. I took the opportunity to play the concerned sibling. At a family gathering, I made sure to casually mention that Vanessa seemed stressed lately, that I was worried about her. Our parents, who still believed she was just going through a rough patch, brushed it off. But the seed was planted. Vanessa, already on edge, lost it. In front of everyone, she snapped at me. It wasn't just a small comment, it was an outright angry outburst. The room went silent. My parents looked stunned, and at first they reassured her, dismissing it as a temporary setback. But as months passed and Vanessa struggled to land another job, their concern grew. Slowly, their blind support turned into uneasy questions, and eventually a reluctant acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the victim in this story. Instead, they told her she was being rude. Another crack. Then, as I continued to rebuild, I secured a major contract, one that earned me recognition. Vanessa found out. She tried to act happy for me, but her forced smile and sudden avoidance of the topic told me everything. She was realizing that the success she had stolen from me wasn't enough to keep her own career afloat. And she had no idea I was the one who had set it all in motion. Vanessa was barely holding on. After the fallout from her botched project, the performance warnings, and the growing distance from her colleagues, she was desperate to prove herself. She started working late nights, trying to fix the damage, but it only made things worse. The stress was getting to her. She was rushing reports, making careless errors, missing deadlines. Every mistake was another nail in her coffin. The mentor assigned to her, who was really just there to babysit, wasn't impressed. The reports she submitted had to be double-checked, and she started getting a reputation for being unreliable. It didn't take long before her mentor officially reported that Vanessa wasn't improving. HR got involved again. This time, they didn't just issue another warning. Vanessa was placed on probation. One more mistake and she was out. She knew what that meant. If she got fired now, her career would be over. She had already burned too many bridges in the industry. She couldn't afford another failure. So she bet everything on one last project. Her boss handed her one final chance to redeem herself. A high-stakes assignment that would determine whether she stayed or not. But I had already seen it coming. Through my contacts, I made sure that the project was more complicated than anything Vanessa had handled before. It was beyond her skill set, something that required actual leadership, problem-solving, and expertise. Everything she lacked. She panicked. Instead of figuring out a way to manage the workload, she took a shortcut. She outsourced part of the project. Quietly, she hired a freelancer to complete sections of it, passing the work off as her own. She must have thought no one would notice. But the company had strict policies about outsourcing confidential projects. Someone in the office noticed discrepancies in the work, differences in writing styles, formatting inconsistencies. It didn't take long before the truth came out. Her boss found out. There was no spinning it this time. No blaming a coworker, no pretending it was a misunderstanding. The evidence was clear. She had broken company policy. Vanessa was called into a boardroom meeting. It was over within minutes. She was fired. No severance. No graceful exit. Just a security escort to clear out her desk. The news spread fast. Our industry is small, and word of her termination reached people before she even had a chance to control the narrative. People who used to admire her now saw her as a liability. Nobody wanted to be associated with her downfall. Her LinkedIn went silent. She quietly removed her job title from her profile, a clear sign that she had nothing lined up. She stopped talking about work at family gatherings, avoiding any conversations about her career. Our parents noticed. Vanessa, who had spent years bragging about her success, was suddenly avoiding eye contact when work was mentioned. They started asking questions, sensing that something was wrong. She tried to lie. She told them she had quit because the workplace was toxic and that she was planning to take a break to rebrand herself. I acted surprised. I played the role of the concerned little sister, expressing how sad I was that things hadn't worked out for her. She could barely stand being in the same room as me. With no job and no new offers, she started burning through her emergency fund. The lavish lifestyle she had kept up, the expensive apartment, the designer clothes, the high-end dinners, was becoming impossible to maintain. And just to make sure she knew exactly how far she had fallen, I made sure to casually mention my own success whenever I saw her. Every time I secured a new deal, got industry recognition, or made a major career move, I let it slip into conversation. She was forced to smile through it, pretending to be happy for me. But I could see it in her eyes. She knew she had lost. And she had no idea I was the one who had made it happen. Losing her job wasn't the end for Vanessa, at least, not in her mind. Even without a career, she still had one thing that defined her, her social life. She had always been the one who hosted the best parties, got invited to every exclusive event, and surrounded herself with successful people. Her entire identity was built on being admired, envied, and respected. So I decided to take that away too. It started subtly. In conversations with mutual friends, I casually dropped hints. Nothing obvious, just small comments that made people start thinking. Things like how Vanessa had been going through a lot lately or how some people aren't as honest as they seem. I never accused her of anything outright. I let people connect the dots themselves. And they did. People started questioning her. If she had lied about quitting her job, what else had she lied about? The whispers started spreading, and soon people weren't as quick to believe the story she told. Then, the invitations stopped. The same people who used to beg for a spot at her gatherings suddenly had other plans. They started leaving her out of group events. She tried to ignore it at first, brushing it off as coincidence. But when the parties she once dominated started happening without her, it became clear she was being pushed out. She tried to rebrand herself. Her social media changed overnight. Suddenly, she was a consultant, an independent strategist, a freelancer. But nobody was buying it. She made dramatic posts about new beginnings and taking control of her future. But behind the scenes, she was scrambling. I made sure no one hired her. Through my industry contacts, I ensured that any company considering working with her was aware of her past mistakes. Every burned bridge, every reckless decision, every unethical move she had made, it was all laid out. Her so-called fresh start wasn't happening. That's when she made a big show about moving. She packed up and posted about her exciting new chapter in a different city. But it was obvious to anyone paying attention. She wasn't moving for a fresh start. She was running from failure. She rented a fancy new apartment, still trying to keep up the image of success. But with no real job and no steady income, it was only a matter of time before things fell apart. Her credit card debt piled up fast. Vanessa had always looked down on people who lived beyond their means. She bragged about her financial independence, mocked people who struggled with money, and always insisted she would never let herself sink to that level. Now, she was maxing out her cards just to keep up appearances. Her relationship started unraveling too. She had been dating a guy who admired her ambition. He had been drawn to her confidence, her drive, the way she always seemed to be moving upward. But now, with no job, no industry connections, and no real plan, she wasn't the same person. He started pulling away. At first, it was just small things. Canceling plans, not answering her calls right away. But then he stopped mentioning her on social media. Eventually, he ended things altogether. That was the breaking point. With her career in shambles, Vanessa tried to maintain appearances. She attended social events, still putting on the polished act she was known for. But over time, people began to notice the inconsistencies, her vague responses about work, the forced optimism. Slowly, her invitations dwindled, her inner circle thinning to only a handful of loyal friends. The more unstable she became, the more people distanced themselves. She started showing up uninvited to events, trying to insert herself back into conversations that no longer included her. People were polite, but they weren't welcoming. She was becoming irrelevant. At a family gathering, I played my role perfectly. I made sure to mention, just loud enough for our parents to hear, that I was worried about Vanessa, that she seemed stressed, overwhelmed. It didn't take much. Already on edge, she snapped at me again. This time there were no excuses, no justification, just raw, bitter frustration. Our parents, for the first time ever, didn't take her side. They started seeing her for who she really was. Vanessa realized she was losing everything. So she did what she always did. She tried to fix it with an apology. It was half-hearted, forced. A desperate attempt to get back into my good graces, to rebuild the bridge she had burned. I smiled, told her I forgave her. But we both knew the truth. She was on her own now, and there was no coming back from this. Vanessa wasn't the same person anymore. The confident, admired, always in control woman had been replaced by someone desperately grasping at the remnants of her past life. She had lost her job, her industry reputation was in shambles, and her social standing was slipping through her fingers. And I was making sure those last pieces disappeared, too. Her decline wasn't just a quiet fade into irrelevance, it was loud, messy, and impossible to ignore. People had started to see her for who she really was. The stories about her manipulations, the lies she had told, the betrayals, everything was out in the open now. She had spent years crafting an image of success and charm, but that image was shattered. Still, she tried to fight back. She rebranded herself online, flooding her social media with inspirational quotes about growth, resilience, and starting over. She framed her downfall as an empowering journey, making vague posts about overcoming adversity and learning from mistakes, without ever admitting what those mistakes actually were. But people weren't buying it. Through small, casual conversations with mutual friends, I made sure her past actions weren't forgotten. Whenever someone mentioned her comeback, I subtly reminded them of how she had treated people before, how she had stepped on others to climb higher. I never had to say much, just enough for them to remember. She decided to host a party, one big event to prove she was still relevant. She sent out dozens of invites, hyped it up on social media, made it clear that it would be the event to attend. Hardly anyone showed up. The few people who did come weren't there for her. They were just there out of curiosity, waiting to see if the queen of social status had anything left to offer. She tried to act like she wasn't bothered, but the tension in the room was obvious. The party fizzled out early, and for the first time, Vanessa realized she didn't hold the same power over people that she used to. Then, her boyfriend left. He had been distant for weeks, gradually pulling away as her life unraveled. He had been drawn to the image of Vanessa, the ambitious, successful woman who had everything figured out. Now, all he saw was someone jobless, unstable, and desperate. He broke things off completely, citing differences in ambition. That's when she lost control. One night at a bar with mutual friends, she got drunk and let everything spill out. She ranted about how people had turned against her, how the industry was unfair, how everyone she had ever trusted had betrayed her. She blamed everyone but herself. Word got around fast. It didn't take long before people started avoiding her entirely. She wasn't just someone who had fallen from grace, she was a liability now. No one wanted to deal with her bitterness, her instability, or her drama. Her money problems worsened. With no job, no backup plan, and no one willing to hire her, she was drowning in bills. The expensive apartment she had moved into to impress people. She couldn't afford it anymore. But instead of admitting defeat, she spun it into another story, claiming she was downsizing to focus on personal growth. She moved into a much smaller, much cheaper place, trying to pretend it was her choice. But everyone knew the truth. Even our parents started to see it. They had defended her for so long, insisting that she was just going through a rough patch. But now, with every bad decision, every failed attempt to rebuild herself, they started questioning things. They started seeing the pattern. I kept playing my role. To everyone else, I was still the supportive sister, the one who was trying to help Vanessa. I never spoke badly about her, I didn't have to. She was doing all the damage herself. Then she asked me for a loan. She sounded embarrassed, careful with her words, trying to make it seem like it was just a small favor. Just a little help until she found work again. I declined. Politely, gently. And that's when her attitude toward me changed. I started noticing the passive-aggressive comments online. She never mentioned me directly, but it was obvious. Posts about how some people pretend to be kind, but their actions show otherwise. It's about how family should support each other, but not everyone understands that. But no one paid attention. She tried reconnecting with old friends, reaching out to people she had once ignored, hoping they would give her another chance. Most of them had moved on. Some responded politely, but none made an effort to bring her back into their lives. Then her birthday came. Vanessa had always been the type to throw extravagant birthday parties, champagne, VIP lounges, designer outfits, the whole thing. But this year, it was different. No big celebration, no dinner invitations, no social media posts from friends hyping up the event, just silence. For the first time, Vanessa had to sit with the consequences of everything she had done. The people she had used, the relationships she had broken, the bridges she had burned. There was no one left to fix it for her. She finally realized she was alone. But by now, it was too late. Vanessa was in survival mode. The arrogance, the smug confidence, the belief that she could always talk her way out of anything, it was all gone. Now, she was just trying to hold on to whatever scraps of her former life she could find. And when people get desperate, they start making mistakes. It started with her crawling back to me. The first call was awkward, a forced attempt at acting like we were still sisters, like none of it had ever happened. She didn't bring up the past, didn't acknowledge what she had done, just tried to slide back into my life as if nothing had changed. She asked how I was doing, feigned interest in my success, and threw in a few nostalgic memories for good measure. I played along. I was polite, distant, just warm enough to keep her thinking there was a chance I would let her back in. But I never made it easy. I let her talk, let her work for my attention, let her feel the power shift between us. Then, the real reason for her call became clear. She needed a job. She needed a job. She casually mentioned how hard the job market was, how competitive things had become, how lucky I was to have such strong industry connections. The hint was obvious. She wanted me to help her find a job. I gave her the same empty encouragement she had once given me. I'm sure you'll figure something out. The silence on the other end of the call was satisfying. She wasn't just struggling, she was running out of options. She tried going to our parents next. For years, they had always been in her corner, always defended her, always found ways to excuse her behavior. But now, after everything, they were finally starting to see through her. She tried apologizing, acting like she was ready to make amends, but it wasn't working anymore. They didn't believe her. She had made too many mistakes, burned too many bridges. They were tired of the cycle. That's when she found a new distraction: dating. She latched onto a guy who was clearly just using her. He had no career, no ambition, no real future. He was the type of guy Vanessa would have once looked down on, but now she clung to him for validation. She needed to feel like someone still wanted her, even if it was someone beneath her usual standards. It didn't take long for her resentment to boil over. The passive-aggressive social media posts started appearing again. She made vague complaints about fake people, and how she had learned the hard way that not everyone wants to see you succeed. She never mentioned me directly, but the meaning was clear. Then, she made a mistake. At a social event, after one too many drinks, she went on a rant about how certain people had stolen opportunities from her. She was bitter, angry, blaming everyone but herself. But this time, people weren't buying it. Mutual friends called her out. They told her she had no one to blame but herself, that she had burned bridges, manipulated people, and that maybe it was time she took responsibility. She tried rebuilding her career with a shady startup. Desperate to prove she was still relevant, she accepted a role at a company that barely had a presence. It was a joke, a failing operation run by inexperienced people. She bragged about it, acting like it was her big comeback. I made sure it never succeeded. Through my contacts, I spread the word that the startup was untrustworthy, that it wasn't worth doing business with. It didn't take much, the company was already on shaky ground. Within months, it collapsed, leaving Vanessa jobless again. She had no choice but to move back home. She framed it as just temporary, saying she wanted to regroup before making her next move. But everyone knew the truth. She couldn't afford to live on her own anymore. She had no job, no income, no plan. She stopped going out, stopped posting as much, stopped pretending she still had things figured out. The person who had once been the center of every social circle, the one who always had something to brag about, was now a ghost of who she used to be. Then one night, in a quiet conversation, she finally acknowledged what she had done to me. She didn't say it in a grand, meaningful way. There was no deep, heartfelt apology, just a quiet admission, a recognition that she had destroyed her own life, that she had made a mistake. But it wasn't true remorse. She regretted the consequences, not the actions. I told her I forgave her, but we both knew there was no coming back from this. She had lost everything, and I wasn't lifting a finger to help her. A year had passed since Vanessa betrayed me. It didn't feel like a long time, but looking at where we both stood now, it might as well have been a lifetime. I was at the peak of my career. After years of hard work, I had built something real. My reputation was stronger than ever, and my name carried weight in the industry. I had just been promoted to a senior leadership position, making more money than I ever thought possible. The job Vanessa had stolen from me, it didn't even matter anymore. I had surpassed it in every way. Meanwhile, Vanessa had nothing left. She had been out of work for months. Every attempt to rebuild her career had failed. She had applied to countless jobs, but the industry had a long memory. No one wanted to hire someone with her track record. Her social life was gone, too. The friends she once controlled, the people who used to worship her, none of them were around anymore. She wasn't invited to events, wasn't tagged in photos, wasn't part of the conversations. She had become a ghost, someone people only talked about in past tense. But Vanessa wasn't done trying. She made one last desperate move. She tried to guilt our parents into saving her. She framed it as a fresh start, telling them she just needed a little help to get back on her feet. She promised she had changed, that she had learned her lesson. She pulled out every trick she had used in the past, expecting them to fold like they always did. But this time, they didn't. For the first time in her life, our parents said no. They saw through her, finally understanding the cycle she had trapped herself in. They weren't willing to throw more money at her problems. They weren't going to bail her out. And that's when she came to me. There was no arrogance this time. No fake confidence, no manipulative charm, just exhaustion, defeat. She apologized again, but this time she wasn't pretending. She knew she had ruined her own life. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for a way back. I gave her my final answer. I don't think we can ever go back to how things were. The words hit harder than I expected. The last bit of hope in her eyes flickered out. She begged, scrambling for anything that would make me change my mind. But I walked away. Vanessa, the woman who had once taken everything from me, was now the one being abandoned. Her downfall became permanent. No career, no reputation, no friends. Just the weight of her own mistakes, pressing down on her. She couldn't survive in the city anymore. Too many people knew what had happened. Too many people had seen her fail. She packed up and moved to a small town, disappearing from the world she had once thrived in. Her online presence faded, too. No more inspirational quotes. No more rising from the ashes speeches. No more attempts at pretending she was still relevant. Just silence. Our parents never said the words out loud, but I knew they finally understood. They knew I had been right all along. Vanessa had done this to herself. I never looked back. I didn't need closure, because I had already won. Vanessa had spent her whole life thinking she could step on people without consequences, that she could manipulate, lie, and betray without ever facing real fallout. But now she was living with it, every single day. And that was the ultimate lesson.